Hey everybody, this is Chad Trim. I'm a building inspector with the parish. We inspect everything from ground up. We inspect new houses. We inspect rebuilds, remodels. We also inspect commercial buildings. But we're going to bring y'all through the steps of a new house inspection. We're going to show you everything from ground up. We're going to start right here with the plumbing rough-in. All right, so first of all, we're gonna go through and we're gonna look at the plans. We always have plans on site. Gotta have plans on site, or we actually have them on our iPads, which is very helpful. We'll look, see how everything's laid out, and then we'll go from there. And we'll start looking at the piping. All right, so what we look at now, we're gonna start looking at the layout of everything. We got bathroom, we got a toilet, the tub, shower, and you got sinks. We make sure you get all your the connections right. Make sure they're laid out right. This one's good. You know, make sure you got the right kind of piping. And then you just go through and look at everything. Make sure everything looks right and deep enough. And then we're gonna go, the next step is look at the air. They usually have air or they usually have water. Either one's fine, that's what they need, but they'll need at least 5 pounds of pressure on the air gauge if it's air. All right, so what we do now, we look at the gauge. The plumbers actually put air on this gauge. So I always like to just hit it, just to make sure there's air. They try to trick you sometimes, but that's all right. I don't mess with them much. It's okay. But this one's good. We're good to go. So we've looked at everything, and now we're gonna start writing a tag. First tag, green tag. Now we're at our temp pole inspection. This is one inspection where the guys are starting to build the house. They need power, so what we call is a temp pole inspection. They put up a small pole. They got to have at least 2 breakers and ground fault receptacles. So we just make sure they got breakers, then ground fault receptacles, and make sure it's grounded, and they're good to go. And that's about all there is to that one. Write a green tag, on to the next one. All right, y'all, so now we're at our next step of the inspection. Our next step is the foundation inspection. We're gonna look for, one of the biggest things we look for is the trenches on the outside. You gotta be 12 inches in undisturbed soil. You're gonna make sure that the corners are turned, they're rounded and not straight, because you want them rounded. Make sure it's got Visqueen in it. That's for a water barrier. And that's about it. And a ground. We also look for a UFOR ground, they call it. And that's what we're gonna be looking for today. Here we go. And this is your trench. You're gonna make sure it's 12 inches deep. With this one, is well over 12 inches, which is always good. The more the better. But it just costs more, but that's okay too. Some people like that. All right, y'all, so this is a UFOR ground. This is what they call the UFOR ground. It actually grounds your slab. You're gonna make sure it's elevated off the ground. It's gotta be 2 inches, at least 2 inches above the ground, the bottom of the ground. And it goes to at least a 20-foot piece of rebar. And that's what your UFOR ground is. And you'll tie that to one of your ground rods. All right, y'all, so what I did forget to mention was the floating forms on the foundation inspection. We use that. The guys come in and do the concrete. It puts a little angle on that concrete. You use it in the garage and on the porches. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit an angle. That way, no water or oil will stay in your garage. It'll just go on out. And man, everything looks good, y'all. We ready to write a green tag? Here we go. All right, y'all, so now we're at the next inspection stage, which is what we call the open wall inspection, which is really one of the biggest ones, because this is where we look, make sure everything's right, make sure everything's up to code, which we look at that on all of them, but this is one of the bigger ones. You're gonna see a lot of progress with your house. Your house is up. We look at building framing, plumbing top out, mechanical HVAC rough in, gas rough in, and then we'll just go from there. So when we're doing our inspection, we're gonna show up, we're gonna do, this is one of the first things most of us look at first, which is the window sill tape that you gotta have for around the windows. During the framing process, one of the things we look at is the bolts that holds the walls up. You wanna make sure to have them, or they have a different kind, it's mud seals where it just goes in the concrete and they fold over. This one has the bolt system. So hurricane clips is another thing we look at. You wanna make sure to have them. It's got 5 holes in each side of it, helps hold the roof on to the rafters and the top track. You want to make sure your cylinder joists are at a good span. You know, a code has so many different codes on the span, you just have to look it up, and we look and make sure everything's up to code, and this span's good. All right, so in some spots you got long spans, they always put these laminate beams, and you also have your cylinder joists tied to them laminate beams so that it's supported well. Okay, and part of framing inspection, you want to make sure all your peaks have collar braces. You got to have them collar braces. That helps the flexibility of the roof. Okay, so we make sure there's always some type of attic access. When you have equipment in the attic, you got to have this attic access that's accessible. This one has it's going to be one of the pull down ladder stairs. Some places you just have a scuttle hole if there isn't nothing up there, but you have to have some type of attic access. All right, so something else we look at on a framing, the back door and the front door, and the window by the door. Okay, so the back door, if it has a window in it, it has to be tempered just like the bathroom window does. And also this window here, within 2 foot. If it's not 2 foot away, it's got to be tempered. And that's for if, like if your kids are running, they come run through this window, it's not going to hurt them bad. To shatter into the million little pieces instead of a big chunk where it'll really cut you and hurt you bad. All right, so some of our open wall inspection, one of it is a plumbing top out. So on a plumbing top out, you're going to want to make sure all these PVC pipes, they should have water in them. That's the vent pipes. And we have that tested so that if there's a leak, like under the slab or something, you'll be able to see it, or it won't have water. And then you want your vents filled up all the way to the top going out. That way the sewage smell don't come into your house. So that's why we do that part of the inspection. Then also in the bathrooms, you want to make sure for an electrical that there's an electrical outlet in each bathroom. Okay, y'all, so another part, this is part of the plumbing top out. We want to make sure you have pressure on the pressure lines. That's the lines that bring the water to your house. They usually always pressure where the washing machine is going to go. So we come here and we'll just turn this valve on and see water spray. Got to make sure to get out of the way though. Trust me, I've gotten hit a couple times. Just like my cameraman did. And also, what we'll look for, every plumbing pipe has to have these nail guards on them. That way, whenever the guys are putting up sheetrock and stuff, they don't hit your plumbing pipes, because you sure don't want water all over your house once they pressure it up. All right, y'all, so on the plumbing top out, what we got, we look at several different things. We're up here with the water heaters. You want to make sure that you always have a shutoff valve on your cold water side. That is a definite. You see the stack going up to the roof, out for your gas. Down here, you're going to have the gas connections. Also, and make sure we check that. That's part of the gas rough end. And you've got to make sure the pop-off valve is piped outside. And that's what we look at on the water heaters. So this is one of your gas lines. This is part of the gas rough end. We make sure it's in a good spot. You go to the connectors and look at them and see if they look good. And that's basically, you want to make sure the pipes are connected. Part of the electrical inspection, you're going to make sure all your wires are tied in on the boxes. Everything's going in good. You also need your wires tied in the wall too, blocked up and everything's stapled. And that's part of the electrical roughing. All right, so now we're looking at the mechanical HVAC up here. And what you look at on that, make sure all the trunk lines have, have the tape, either have the 181 tape or they have masting is what these guys use. And that's basically the same thing, just as long as it's sealed. And we just make sure everything's up there and everything looks right. Also in the bathrooms, you're gonna have a mechanical HVAC port right here where you got your vent fan that goes out and it's gonna be piped outside. and you're gonna have that tape right next to it that's gonna be UL 181 rated. Gotta make sure of that. Okay, so this is your dryer vent. This is part of your mechanical HVAC. You know, it goes all the way out. You gotta make sure it vents outside. And also you got it sealed with this 181 tape. All right, y'all, so there was your open wall inspection. Now we're ready. You see more progress going. You see more going and more to come. Put that green tag on. Everybody likes the green tag. We don't want no red tags. Nobody wants red tag. Just write it out and we just hang it up. On to the next step. All right, so now we're at our next inspection, which is the building envelope. What it is, the building envelope is an insulation inspection, and that's before they put the sheetrock up. So we're gonna look at the R value. You have 3 different type of insulations. You got a blown-in insulation, which that's what this is, and they'll send paperwork with the R value. Then you got matting, which that's the kind that you put in with the paper back or whatever. Then you have foam insulation, which that's the whole entire house is foamed. What you're gonna look for is around the windows, around the bottom track, you wanna make sure that has foam or caulk. And then at the top track, you wanna make sure all the holes are caulked. Everything except for foam insulation has to have that. All right, guys, another green tag. Contractors will be happy, so will the homeowners. Envelope inspection. All right, y'all, well now we're at one of the final inspections of the job where it goes, this is actually an electrical temp final. It's gonna give your house power so your guys can come in and finish all your work on the inside, make sure all the power works, make sure all the bathrooms work, make sure you get all your stuff's wired right. What y'all should have at this point, you should have your panel wired up, all your breakers in, you should have your disconnect outside, your 2 ground rods should be in, you should have 98% of your fixtures wired, lights up, electrical stuff up as much as you can. 98% is what we look for. Once you have that, we'll approve it for power. Power company comes and your guys can keep on working. So now one of the things we do when we come to a receptacle, we make sure it's got tamper resistant. So inside the receptacles, they got some little plastic pieces that makes it tamper resistant. All houses have to have tamper resistant now. Make sure your fire alarm is wired up and it's up there. Hopefully it's plugged in already. If not, they can do that on the final. This is your light switch. So we want to make sure it's got a switch. It don't always have the cover on it at this stage. They're a little bit ahead. They put the cover already, so they're a little bit ahead of the game, so that's a plus. All right, y'all, so now you've seen that we got all the fixtures in. We've got about 98% of them in. You got all the receptacles in, light switches, lights, fans, smoke alarms. Now we're gonna go look at the panel and make sure all the breakers are in, because you gotta have all the breakers in before we can pass it for power. All right, so we come into the garage, usually is where their outside panel is or wherever their electric panel is. Make sure the breakers are hooked up. They're gonna, everything's wired right. You got your surge protector. Normally you'll see no writing on the panel yet, but they actually got ahead and did it already, but that's good. They're a little ahead of the game, like I said already. Now we're gonna go look outside and see if they have their disconnect outside, and then we'll be able to pass it for power. All right, y'all, so we go outside. We're gonna make sure there's disconnect. Okay, they got a disconnect outside. It's hooked. Okay, meter's there. They got 2 ground rods. We're getting another green tag, getting closer and closer. Next step's the final. Here we go. All right, guys, so here we go. This is the last inspection. This is what everybody waits for, the final inspection. So we're gonna get started here in a second. So what we look for on this, we wanna make sure all the ground faults trip around the kitchen, bathrooms. We're gonna make sure the water's hot. Gotta have hot water. We'll get up in the attic, make sure the vents go out, the stacks for the gas. We'll make sure the smoke detectors go off, make sure all the plumbing's right. We're gonna look under the cabinets. Also, let's not forget about the electrical panel. We gotta make sure it's labeled. Gotta make sure we have arc fault and ground fault breakers if needed. And we'll just go from there, make sure everything works. All right, now we're gonna make sure there's some hot water. Make sure it gets real hot and make sure it's good. Oh yeah, it's hot, good. Now we're ready to take some showers and wash some dishes. All right, so now we come to the attic. This is the fun part. Pull it down, make sure not to kill yourself with the ladder. Knock you in the head real good. And then we'll just go on up. All right, so now in the attic, what you're gonna look for, you always gotta have a receptacle so that you can service the ACs, and you also gotta have a light. So you wanna have a light up here, and then we start looking at the vent. This is the like gas release for the water heater, and this is the vent for the AC. And you also look, make sure everything's insulated. You're gonna see all the insulation. And you just make sure all your vents go out of the attic. Nothing can be vented in the attic. It's gotta go outside. So you come out and you make sure your vent fans from your bathrooms and washroom is venting outside. So we want to make sure all the fire alarms go off. It's pretty loud. And you want to make sure when they go off that all the rest of them go off too. And outside the bedrooms, you want to make sure there's CO detectors plus smoke detectors. Make sure all the sinks work. Check the water. Everything's on. Again, look under the cabinets. Make sure all the pipes are hooked up. And everything looks good. All right, now we're gonna look at the electrical panel. Gonna make sure it's got a surge protector. And then make sure it's got arc fault breakers, which these are arc fault and ground fault. And you want to make sure your panel's labeled. That's a big thing right there. And then we're just going to trip all our breakers back that we tripped earlier. That's it. We also have to have an outside disconnect, so you come outside and check, make sure there's a disconnect in here. Good to go. And then we always make sure there's an address posted. You have to have a 911 address posted. All right, so now the time's come. They get a green tag. That's what everybody wants too. That means it's done. All right, so got building final, electrical final, plumbing final, mechanical final. Write it out. 26. All right, so we're done. The inspection process is finished. I tie on the tag. Officially, they can move in with this tag, but they will get a certificate of occupancy from the office, and they're ready to move in. The end.